You probably feel like you're moving right now. Maybe you're walking or just shifting in your chair. But if we follow strict logic, you aren't moving at all. You are physically trapped. Imagine you decide to walk across your bedroom to get into bed. To reach your destination, you obviously have to cross the halfway point first. This diagram shows your path. Once you hit that halfway mark, you still have the rest of the room to cross. So you have to cross half of that remaining distance, and then half of that new remaining distance. Because you can always cut a distance in half, this process repeats infinitely. You step into a quarter of the space, then an eighth, then a 16th. You get endlessly closer to your bed, but you always leave a tiny, measurable gap. If every trip you take requires you to complete an endless sequence of halves, you can never reach the end. Arriving anywhere becomes logically impossible. We can push this logic even further. Picture a foot race where a fast runner gives a slight tortoise a slight head start. By the time the runner sprints to the spot where the tortoise began, the tortoise has crawled a little bit further down the track. Now the runner has to close that new, smaller gap, but by the time they do, the tortoise has moved again. The runner is forced into an endless loop of catching up to where the tortoise used to be. Now let's apply this to time. If you snap time shut and look at an isolated 0-second instant, an arrow fired from a bow is suspended perfectly still in the air. It takes up a specific space, and it isn't moving because an instant has no duration. But a minute, or an hour, or a day is just a stacked sequence of these frozen moments. If the fastest human alive cannot pass a creeping turtle, and every individual moment in time is completely frozen, then the physical movement we experience every day has to be an illusion. Centuries before the birth of modern physics, ancient thinkers built logical traps designed to dismantle our perception of reality. Over 2,000 years ago, an ancient Greek thinker named Zeno of Elea uncovered a dark mathematical secret about the nature of space. Zeno argued that performing any movement requires you to finish an infinite number of tasks. You have to cross an infinite number of half spaces before you can even take a single step. His argument rested on the assumption that space is continuous, a perfectly smooth sheet that can be divided forever. If you can always divide a distance, then there are always more points to touch before you reach your goal. If space is truly smooth, we are faced with a contradiction. We cannot finish infinite tasks in a finite amount of time. Logically, we should be frozen in place. While philosophers debated this logic for generations, the development of calculus introduced a way to measure the infinite directly. The core of the solution lies in a concept called a convergent geometric series. This diagram shows the math in action. We see a half, a quarter, an eighth, and so on. Even though the number of pieces is endless, they fit perfectly inside the boundary of a single unit. An infinite sequence of shrinking fractions adds up to a solid, finite number. This proves that an infinite sequence of tasks doesn't require an infinite amount of time. If a second can be divided just as infinitely as a meter, then our movement and the time we use to move scale together perfectly. We can cross infinite points because we are traveling through infinite moments. But math is only half the story. The physical truth of how we walk across a room hides deep within quantum physics. Zeno's trap assumes that space is like a perfectly smooth sheet of glass that can be cut in half forever. But reality isn't smooth. In quantum gravity, there is a fundamental limit called the Planck length. It is an unimaginably tiny but unbreakable unit of distance, the smallest possible pixel of the universe. Beyond this point, the very concept of distance ceases to exist. Because this limit exists, walking to your bed is not an infinite series of divisions. It is a massive but finite number of tiny jumps from one pixel to the next. The problem of infinity simply vanishes. We do not glide smoothly through the world. We jump from pixel to pixel, blind to the invisible gaps of a universe that has a hard